Hello, Dakota here with Live Rogue again. Today I'd like to do a review on the Sterling ATS rappel device. We have two lines set up today. This is one rope, but I've got two strands and they are independent, so I can either rappel on them with both strands or use one single strand to rappel. What I'd like to show you first is one single strand, how to set up the ATS for simplicity. So the initial way to set up an ATS is by taking a bight of loop here. You stick it through the back end of the hexagon shaped loop at the top and bring it down and clip it through your carabiner. One thing I would like to mention is that the ATS has a curve to it, right? So the way I have this set up actually gives you more friction. If I were to flip this device over like this and rig the other way, then it would give me lower friction. So I can actually rappel on this if it's the right diameter of rope and I have enough friction. I'm able to rappel just like this. If I want to add more friction, what I want to do is I hook a horn here, so I wrap it around one horn there and then a horn up here. And this is a really natural position and I'm able to add a lot more friction quite easily. Okay. Next, what I'd like to show you is another way to rig this, where when you set this initial setup up, you just take a little bit of a bite of that and you pull it over your lower left horn. Of course, if you're left-handed, you would do this all in a mirrored fashion. And what this does is gives me a little bit more friction from the get-go, which I like. And the best part of this is set up in this method, not the initial method I showed you. You can lock off very simply, and I'll show you this. What I'm going to do is I'll lean back. You want to keep the tension on your hand here, and you bring this strand up over the top and under both of the top horns there, and then with your weight on it you're going to pull until you hear it pop. And I'm actually locked off now. What I'd like to show you is I'll take off my safety, and as mentioned, I'm locked off. If I wanted extra security, say I'm halfway down the rappel, what I could do is tie off this strand. There's several ways of doing this, but what I'll do today is my handy dandy clove hitch. So I'll just take a clove hitch, which is nice because it's adjustable. Throw it on a carabiner here and clip it through my harness. So while my rope is weighted, when I'm ready to take the lock off, right, the block off, I'll remove the clove hitch from my waist, and then I'll tuck the rope behind the horns, and with my hands on the brake strand, I'm going to pull until I hear it pop. There it is. Now I'm free to rappel and continue my descent. Again, if I need to add friction, I can just loop these horns quite easily and continue. So the next method I'd like to show you to rappel with an ATS is with both strands. So if you have a thin rope especially, it can be nice to add friction. What you'll do is, in a similar fashion to the first method I showed you, you'll grab a bight of both of those ropes, pull both of those ropes through the carabiner there like an 8. Again, if I needed to add friction, I can take these over these horns and I've got added friction. The next method I would like to show you to rappel or to rig the device are by taking two bites, sticking one through each of these plaquette holes. Plaquettes were some of the first rappelling devices out there. Actually, people would construct them out of oval carabiners. And what I can do here is just pull these bites up to the top, and then I can click my carabiner through both of those like that, and carefully slide the carabiner down over the device with those bites around it. So the nice thing about this, the pro to this method, is that if you have just a junky carabiner, or if you have a steel carabiner that you'd like to use as that block in the plaquette, all of the friction goes on the spine of this carabiner, and you save the carabiner that is your safety carabiner. A variation of the plaquette mode I showed you would be to auto block it. So what I'll do is I'll take that bite again of both lines and I'll stick them through my device. But what I want you to notice is I actually I put 1/2 twist in there so that my brake hand side, or the side going down, is actually loaded on top, and the strands that go to my top anchor actually come out the bottom. And then I'll do the same method of hooking the carabiner to them. Pull these bites through, flip my carabiner around them and the strands below, slide it down. And what I'd like you to see here is that this is actually locked off. So I'm completely locked off, and unless I apply some sort of leverage to this, I actually cannot rappel. So this is actually a good method for ascending a rope. The next technique I'll show you is rigging the plaquette with a single strand. This is especially beneficial when you have a thin diameter rope. So what I'll do is take my bite again, I'll stick it through one of the plaquette holes. I prefer to start on my brake hand side so it sets up naturally. Then what I'll do is I'll take another bite on the up rope side and stick it through the other side with 1/2 twist in there. So I'll stick my carabiner spine right through this area. But when I flip this over, the telltale sign this is correct is you'll see one crisscross line on the back. So let me put the carabiner through. Same as the methods that I've shown you so far. You pull these through. It'll be a little bit tougher to pull this one through this way because the lines on the back side are opposing each other. But I clip my carabiner through those bites around the up rope side, the rope going up to my anchor, and then dress it. Nice thing about this, as I mentioned, is I've got a lot of tension on this, a lot of friction. So this particular rope, which is about a 9mm, is a little bit too thick of a line to actually make this technique practical. Alright, couple of personal notes on the ATS. The ATS is a really nice device. It's super versatile. Once you get it in your hands and you practice and play around with it a little bit and get comfortable with it, it's almost like second nature to rig it. And then I'll go over some of the cons, so to speak, of the ATS. So you've got a small hole here for your carabiners. One thing you need to make sure is that your carabiner, the locking carabiner you use to hook to your harness, is thin enough to fit through this eye hole. This eye hole is about 1 centimeter in diameter, and it's not very thick, so it can be quite snug to get carabiners on. What is nice is when you're rigging the rappel, where you're actually using your safety carabiner in the system for part of the friction, when you open your gate, this is not a device that will just flop off. Quick confession, when I first climbed the Grand Teton when I was 18 years old, I was pretty high on on the wall, and I pulled my ATC, my Black Diamond ATC at the time, off to rig up a belay, and I dropped it, and luckily it only fell about 20 feet below me and was easily recoverable, but if it weren't, that would have been a much more challenging situation. Lastly, the ATS is also made out of aluminum, and most devices on the market are, so this is not an issue that's unique to the ATS, but I've only used this in a couple of canyon settings, and you can see the wear here is already starting to, to make grooves that are reasonably deep. Like I said, and I've only used this minimally so far, and that's the challenge with aluminum devices. Last note, always make sure that you practice these techniques in a controlled setting and environment prior to using them in the field. Make sure that you know, in your backyard or at home, you try this and get comfortable with it before you take it out in the field. Thanks for watching. If you like what we had to share, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you soon. Hello, Dakota here with Live Rogue again. Today I'd like to do a review on the Sterling ATS rappel device. We have two lines set up today. This is one rope, but I've got two strands and they are independent, so I can either rappel on them with both strands or use one single strand to rappel. What I'd like to show you first is one single strand, how to set up the ATS for simplicity. So the initial way to set up an ATS is by taking a bight of loop here. You stick it through the back end of the hexagon shaped loop at the top and bring it down and clip it through your carabiner. One thing I would like to mention is that the ATS has a curve to it, right? So the way I have this set